parents were told, whether subtly or directly, that they just didn't know enough to make good educational decisions for their kids. Well, during COVID, parents realized they are the only people who can make these decisions for their kids because they know their kids better than anyone.
Welcome back to the OpenEd podcast. I'm Ella Richmond, your sometimes host, and today I'm joined by Andrew Campanella. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much, Ella. I appreciate it.
Today I wanted to open up with one very specific question. So lots of people approach the concept school choice as something very political, right? And in your opinion, it's not. It's something very human. What does choice mean to you, and what is the importance of it?
Sure. So we hear so much about school choice, like you said, and it's usually framed through the context of politics, somebody using it as a wedge to win an argument. We at the National School Choice Awareness Foundation look at school choice as an intensely personal decision that a mom or a dad or a caregiver makes for the benefit of their children. And for a mom, in a street, in a community, who makes the choice to send their child to a traditional public school, and the parent next door who decides to send their child to a public charter school or a private school, those are political decisions. Those are personal decisions. Those are decisions to help their kids pursue their dreams. And so we want people to look at choosing schools as a matter of personal choice, just like they think about what type of park you're going to go to on the weekend. That's not a political decision. What kind of car you're going to drive, where are you going to live? Those aren't political decisions. Those are personal choices. And so is school choice. And so that's the way we frame it when we let families know about their options. Not that one type of school is better than another type of school, or that we need more options because one system isn't working, but that there are more choices and families benefit when they have those opportunities.
I love that. And I love the emphasis there. We were just talking about this a little bit, but the idea behind open education is basically that every family should be able to have the flexibility to choose what works for them. And there's this influx of options inside of the education movement that offers people everything from charter to public to private to, virtual to, mix and match type of co-op and homeschool. How do you figure out what's right for you? So let's say we're talking to, parents that are really facing this critical moment in their kids' education. They're saying something's not working, but I don't know what it is. And I also don't know what's going to be the right fit. What's the right choice? Where do they even start?
The first place you need to start is by looking inwards, looking at your child, looking at your family, looking at what your hopes and goals are for your child. Before you look at a school type, before you decide whether or not you think that one type of school is better than another, you need to identify what your goals are. And then you need to work from there to identify what options are in your community and narrow your choices down. We have a ton of free resources on our website, which is myschoolchoice.com. I'm not just plugging the site. We have worksheets, we have state guides. We really want families to be able to go through a 7-step, easy process, easy but thoughtful, to be able to find the right environment. Because it's not just about a test score of a school. It's not just about what other people say. It's about what is right for your child as an individual learner.
Yes, 100%. And what's interesting is, especially inside of OpenEd, something that we're really curious about is the mental models that people come into conversations with, right? So when a parent comes into the conversation of choosing a school, what are they already thinking? Well, something that we've run into, and I would be curious to hear your take on this, is that school has to look a certain way, right? How do you uneducate or untie those two premises together?
That is such a great question. And I think that we saw this as a bigger challenge 5 years ago before COVID. COVID helped undo, there was nothing good about COVID, but when it came to education, it was really disruptive, and it showed parents that there are different ways to educate kids. And sometimes the more traditional route is not exactly working for their child. Right. Some parents had kids who did better. Other parents had kids who lost months, if not years of learning. And so I think parents then said, we need to do whatever actually works. And so that helped, if it helped anything. But you also need to let parents know that the outcomes and the results, your child's academic attainment, your child's happiness, your child's ability to develop a curiosity, which is really the building block of learning, those things are important. And if you can get those 3 things done, it really doesn't matter what it looks like or how it's structured, as long as it's working. And that's why we're seeing a huge growth in microschools and mix and match learning right now. We just did a survey of 2,800 parents, a census balanced survey, and we saw a jump in interest in non-traditional education by like 220% because families are realizing
Wow.
things don't always have to look like they used to.
Interesting. And so the 220% jump in education, do you think parents are redefining what they think their role is in education as well?
Absolutely. And so I think what parents are doing is they are saying, look, I am confident in different types of schools. I'm confident in schools, but I'm not going to trust until I verify. But I will trust myself more. And that is what we want. We want parents to recognize that they know their kids better than anybody else. And for decades, parents were told, whether subtly or directly, that they just didn't know enough to make good educational decisions for their kids. Well, during COVID, parents realized they are the only people who can make these decisions for their kids because they know their kids better than anyone. They know their strengths, their weaknesses, the challenges they're facing, the opportunities the kids want to pursue, what makes them happy. That's what a mom or dad knows. And so they're the experts. They're realizing that. And we're seeing a commensurate increase in awareness, parents understanding more about their school choice options, which was kind of surprising to us, but very exciting at the same time.
Yeah, and why do you think, like going back to, the very beginning of school choice, why do you think parents don't and didn't treat education as though they were consumers, right? We have so many things that we treat as though we're consumers in the world, but education has not been one of them.
So you have two sort of stories here, I think. You've got the parents didn't treat it as if they were consumers, and also then parents were frequently rather, blamed for not being as involved in their kids' education as they could be to improve their kids' success. So that was always sort of like a scapegoating, but they go hand in hand. Because if you don't give parents the initial choice of how they educate their kids and where they send their kids to school and what model will work best for their kids, you're telling them from the very beginning that they are not the expert in this process and they shouldn't have a lot of involvement in the process. But if you get them involved in the beginning and you give them options and you let them pursue those choices, you will see more involved parents. And that's what we see now. With 25 states expanding school choice, more parents than ever before last year looking around at their options and more parents choosing. And so I think that those things really go hand in hand. And what we need is not just parents remembering that they have choices, but parents reminding themselves constantly that they deserve a say.
I love that. And I want to go back and hammer this in a little bit more just because I think this is the key thing, right? That every kid deserves the opportunity to choose what works best for them. What do you think we've gotten wrong fundamentally whenever it comes to educating kids, right? So like something that I love to think about is the idea that kids go through school and then they think that they're bad at X subject, right? But something just might not be working for them. Either the approach, either the teaching style, either, maybe the focus that they're getting in a classroom. What do you think is wrong about the way that we've viewed education that made it so that it was standardized, like one size fits all? This is how we're doing education.
Yeah, I'm just going to go back to this is not a good policy answer. This is a gut answer. And so
Okay.
one of the things that I've always thought, going back to when I was in school, is that you have a bunch of students in a classroom, 25 or 30, I'm thinking of a high school, and you have a test, whether it's a midterm or a final or whatever. And kid gets a C or a D. And that just goes on their report card, and then they get moved on to the next grade or the next level. But they still didn't learn that. And instead of trying to figure out a way to get them to learn it, if it's really important, we just labeled them with a C or a D and moved on. And I've always thought that the grading system has been more punitive than designed to encourage the acquisition of knowledge. And there's got to be a better way to do it. Like if we really want people to learn things, we have to realize it takes some people a little bit longer to learn things. It takes other people faster. And for some people, they will get to the A or the B on the test faster. And so I think that that's always been a challenge. If it's really about attaining knowledge, we need to do it in a better way where we're not labeling people as much as we are guiding them along.
So then what are the right questions to ask to figure out a solution to that?
If my child doesn't get a good grade on a test, how do you know they actually are going to learn that information before you put them into the next test? Some of this failure culture, if you will, is a snowball effect. A child might do poorly in one or two classes, and as a result of not getting that knowledge, that's impacting many years of their grades and their progression. And so really there needs to be immediate intervention if there's a challenge. And I think that happens too little. And people don't want to figure it out, or they don't think it matters. And to me, again, this is not a policy thing, it's a personal thing. And I think that really could help more kids. And that's the benefit of making sure that families have personalized, customized education for their children.
Yeah. Do you think we have to switch conversations around education for people to understand how many opportunities and options there are to customize truly? Right? Because back to the mental models idea, there is this way that people think education should look. And inside of our program, we have a lot of families that are trying to figure out the best way to educate their kids. And right, like, and even in a lot of homeschool circles, they'll start with trying to replicate traditional school, right? They will start with saying, okay, this is how we're going to do school because this is how school should work. What do we need to almost rethink to understand customized education properly?
Well, I think that really families should take a look at different models and get an idea of what's out there and really explore their options in their community, even if they don't want to make a change right now. Just figure out what's going on, and you will see, if you haven't been in a school for a while, or if you haven't been in school yourself for a while, that things have changed a lot and there are more options out there. And what you brought up with homeschooling, I wrote about this in my book, where families told me frequently that they couldn't homeschool, or that it was not possible for them because they didn't have certain hours in a day, during the work day to do the homeschooling, and they didn't have the set schedule 7 or 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. And when told, well, there's no law that says it has to be these specific hours. You could do it in the morning and at night, and you can do it on the weekends, and there's no rule that says you can't. People's eyes go like, oh, right, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. We put things in boxes sometimes in our brains that they don't necessarily need to be, and we're our own worst enemy in terms of progress. So I think families learning about how other parents are doing it is helpful. We try to tell stories about that and shine a spotlight on it during School Choice Week each year, which is one of the 3 charitable programs of our foundation. And it's a heck of a lot of fun, but also enlightening for people so they can see what's out there. They can see the options for families.
I love that. Can you give us a little bit of a sneak peek into School Choice Week? I'm excited. I was looking up a couple things and I saw that there's one very close to me, so I will be attending that. But what are the opportunities and options for families in attending School Choice Week, and then also looking into the resources available to them through School Choice Week?
Sure. So National School Choice Week starts on January 26th, 7 days, and this is our 15th anniversary. And every year, we work with more than 25,000 schools all across the country, from traditional public schools to charter, magnet, private, online, home, and non-traditional. And everybody plans events and activities designed to raise awareness of the importance of opportunity and education in their communities. And so there are opportunities for families to go to multi-sector school fairs, opportunities for individual schools to celebrate and raise community awareness of what they're doing. And really, the goal is to shine as bright a possible spotlight on all the different ways that kids can learn in this country and the options that are available for parents. And so if you're a parent, you can go to our schoolchoiceweek.com website, look up what events are near you if you want to go to one, or find the information about what's available in your state, because we want families to get the process started of looking for a new school for the next school year now, instead of waiting until the spring or summer. There's a lot of benefits to starting earlier.
True. Something that we've also seen is, people start the conversation now. They'll identify the fact that something's not working, and then they don't recognize that different than, say, a traditional public school or a traditional private school even. There's almost this really cool opportunity in having some time between now and when school starts to just look into things, to look into options, to figure out what your kid likes, to try a couple things, and then to be able to start the whole year with a little bit more of an informed approach than just saying, okay, hold on, wait a second, where are we even going to begin?
That's exactly right. And the other good thing about it is, if parents get the process started earlier, then they create a feedback loop for all the different types of schools out there. And if a school sees that there's a lot of parent demand, they can prepare to staff up for next year. If schools hear this information in the late summer, they're not going to be able to find additional teachers necessarily, so they can expand the number of seats in that school for that year. And so really, by starting early, everybody benefits, and parents are provided with more options because there are more seats. And so it's sort of like a great synergy between the searching, the demand, and the supply. And we want people to get started. I know it's a cold time of the year, and I know it seems really early to be thinking about the next school year, but it's really the right time.
What has gotten you so passionate about this, this option in education kind of
Caffeine.
movement? And oh goodness.
Aside from the caffeine, my own experience. And so I'll just tell you, I grew up in New Jersey. I went to great traditional public schools. I had amazing teachers, and I am a huge champion of public education, and so is our entire team. When I went to college in Washington, D.C., I was volunteering for a civics education program in D.C. schools. And I met with a bunch of high schoolers, and they were the most earnest kids in the world, but they had challenges reading and writing, even in high school. And one of the students told me that they never had a teacher ever stay the full year. And I couldn't believe it. It was like this complete, I can't even describe the word. It was shocking to me. It jarred me. And at that moment, I realized how privileged was I to be able to go to a school that not only was considered by others to be a good school, but that actually worked for me. And how unfair it is for some kids to go to schools that don't work for them. And from that moment, I guess I realized I wanted to work in education. I'd never planned on it. I didn't go to school for it. It never occurred to me. But then I said, look, this is something I care about. Why did I get these opportunities and other people didn't? And I decided to work first in teacher certification, which is the area that directly related to my experience with those kids, is getting teachers in the classroom. And I did that for a few years, and then into the issue of multi-sector school choice. And I've been doing it now, all of this for 20-something years.
Wow. And what was something that was the most surprising to you whenever you started working in this area?
Honestly, the most surprising thing to me, and I'll just be totally honest, is when I first got involved in education reform and I talked to a recruiter for a job. They wanted to hire me, and I said, this isn't some crazy cultural movement. Is it? Like, I'm not joining like this political, crusade somehow, or, that's going to violate some beliefs that I have or whatever, anything. And they were like, well, you should meet the people first. And I did. And my entire time in this movement over 20 years, you look at what opponents say about us, and I just have to laugh. Like, I have to laugh because it's so untrue. It's so untrue that we're advocates against one type of option and for another. And I'm talking about the broader movement. Obviously, I think our organization is pretty clearly in every camp. But just surprises me, that this real movement of so many people who care so much about kids' futures and their educations isn't as well represented as it could be. I guess that surprised me the most.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. This is something that's been interesting to me getting into this space as well. It's I have this fundamental belief that when individuals flourish, societies flourish, and where that starts is childhood and child education. But when you get to the nitty gritty, like, every single human is different. Every single human's perfect path looks different, and every single person is going to define that for themselves. And so whenever you have the freedom to make choices and to bear the cost of those choices yourself, like, that's really, really important. And definitely in this space, in lots of spaces right now and today, there's a lot of such very strong beliefs, lots of politics, lots of jumping around and making sure that you don't say the wrong thing. But at the fundamental, most like basic level, this is just about humans. This is just about humans that succeed. And when humans succeed, more humans succeed. And like, that is the most important thing.
I totally agree with you. And I remember 5, 6, 7 years ago when I would speak to people about happiness. And in some quarters, I would see their eyes roll almost. And I would say, happiness is in our founding documents, the pursuit of happiness. It is something that was important to our founders. But people looked at it as so superfluous and so unnecessary. And this is right after, No Child Left Behind and, sort of this achievement culture, which had benefits to it, but constant testing and things like that. And talking about happiness was like, well, how do you measure happiness? Well, parents can measure it for their own kids, and kids can measure it for themselves, and families can measure it for their collective unit. But just to what you said, like, this is about people, this is about their lives, this is about their prospering, and so all the ingredients matter. Everything matters, and we can't just focus on one factor. We have to look at all the different ingredients and make sure that it is a good fit indeed.
Yeah, and to that point, you can't measure success the same way. Like, success, everybody gets to measure success differently, and parents understand this implicitly. Whenever you have multiple kids, it's like, okay, I just want my kids to be happy and fulfilled and for them to be successful, but success is not going to look the same for every single kid. One kid may really be fascinated by this one thing. Maybe success to them is doctor, lawyer, whatever. Maybe success to another kid is something very, very different. I'm going to be very active in my community. I'm not going to, be on a national pedestal or anything like that. But I think that's very interesting that, like, on a micro level, we understand that. Like, whenever I'm with my brothers, for example, we all define success differently. But then whenever you expand it out to this, large conceptual level, sometimes it's hard to remember that whenever you're just in this small bubble, you can understand that success looks different for all of us. You can understand that we all have, unique characteristics and we learn differently. But then you expand it out, and, it's hard to keep that principle.
Yeah, and I don't know if this has anything to do with education, but you think about success and you also think about happiness, and you think about how whether or not you're happy plays such a role in defining whether or not you view yourself as successful. And sometimes it can change by the day. And sometimes it can change your motivation and your level of contentment and things like that. And so all these things are so difficult to gauge, but you're right. Everybody's an individual. They learn differently. They perceive things differently. Education needs to reflect that, just like every other aspect of life reflects that. And consumerism and choices that people make in behaviors, in traditions, all of that matters.
Yeah. I'm curious to know. So I have listened to a couple of other of your interviews, and I know that community and basically building up communities is very important to you. And the fact that children can, grow up to be very productive members of their communities is really awesome. Have you seen that? Like, can you give an example of that where offering options and choice has led to somebody's success, which has led to broader success?
Yes, in fact, we have a young woman who a few years back hosted a digital kickoff, nationwide kickoff for National School Choice Week. She attended I believe it was a magnet school in Nevada, and she was just an absolutely amazing chef. And her name is Nessa,
That's
and
cool.
she opened her own bakery. And a story like that is incredible. We have another young woman. Her name is Zaida, and she went to a magnet school or a charter school for arts and for science and technology in Texas. And now she is one of the youngest aeronautical engineers for NASA and serves on the board of one of our C3s. And so you look at these folks, totally different interests, and yet they're pursuing what they wanted to do and what they were inspired and to do, and what was their curiosity, and they turned it into a career. And I mean, those types of stories are what keeps me going. Like, that is so cool to me. Somebody had an idea, they wanted to do something, they learned about it, and then they went into that. Those are just two examples. I have so many more.
What would you say are some barriers that are preventing options in, the broader nation?
Sure. So obviously there are legislative barriers. Some states just don't have enough choices. Some of those barriers include the lack of availability of being able to transfer your child to a different public school outside of your zone, open enrollment. People don't talk about it a lot. It is important. States could do more. To me, it should be a nonpartisan issue. Artificial caps on programs like charter schools and private school choice, and barriers that prevent microschools from opening, and onerous requirements on homeschooling families, just to name a few. Online schools that are not allowed to be charter schools in certain states. So there are a lot of legislative and policy barriers. There's also a big awareness gap. And unfortunately, lower income families and disadvantaged families are less likely to know about the options that are available to them. And that's one of the things that we work on through our 2 awareness programs that work year-round, Navigate School Choice and Conoce tus opciones escolares. I don't speak Spanish, but we have a team that does. And we work to raise awareness, especially for disadvantaged families, so they can know their options. You have other barriers like transportation. People don't want to talk about it within the movement. It's a problem. We have to get to the bottom of it. We have to modernize transportation for education so that it matches all the options that are provided. And then programs need to be better administered. We're seeing new and really promising programs implemented or passed in states, and the administration is lagging in terms of parents actually getting the resources, getting the information, using the dollars, deploying them to providers or to schools. There's customer service issues. They need to be addressed. We need to be open about it, even though some of the players live right within our movement.
Yeah, and what's the parent role here? So let's say that I'm an interested parent in options, right? All I want and all I care about is making sure that as many options are available to me and my family as possible so that we can customize, build, mix and match whatever works best for us. What is important for me to be aware of and or be doing to actively participate in the things that are happening in my state?
So follow along what's going on. Most importantly, though, track how your child is doing in school, what their progress is, how happy they are. Communicate with your child's teachers. Get as involved as you can. Those are the most important things. And follow along on the progress. And if you see opportunities that are being presented for families that you want to avail yourself of, but have to be decided by legislature, have your voice heard. Don't be afraid. Every voice does count. And you might think, well, it doesn't matter. They got people showing up, or these people are too important for my voice to matter. I'll tell you what, an authentic parent voice is 10 times more powerful than somebody like me who does this for a living. It really is. People want to hear your story. They want to hear why a new option matters. And so get out there and speak about this and advocate for your child, your family, and for other kids you'll probably never have the chance to even meet.
And that's something actually very, very important that we're focusing on inside of OpenEd is because we give families so much choice, it is really important to highlight the stories of how they're using it, right? And so that's probably my favorite thing is there's almost no family that is using it in the exact same way. There are families that have many, many kids and they're using it for every single one of them. Just to create flexibility in the way that they educate. There are families that have medical conditions and illnesses that they have to maintain flexibility for. All kinds of different ways to mix and match and all kinds of different reasons to. And I honestly think that is the key. It's like, how can we bring this back to the personal level, back to the very beginning of our conversation, right? This is impacting humans. This is impacting families. This is impacting lives. And that is something that's so unique about this space is that you get to share that. And everybody, like, you grew up in a family. It's not something that people can't resonate with, right? Like, you grew up in a family, you grew up being educated. Everybody can resonate with the story of a family.
That's right. And sometimes the stories that resonate most with parents are not the hallmarky, sappy stories, even though those are beneficial, but just like a real practical thing that worked for a kid. We always tend for the most dramatic possible story, and there are so many out there, but parents need to be able to see themselves in these stories, and not every kid grew up in abject poverty, and so we want school choice to be applicable to everybody, whether a child grew up in poverty or whether a child is in a middle-class family and the option just isn't working. Parents need to be able to see themselves in those stories. So I encourage all the storytellers out there, don't discount your story because you don't think it's dramatic enough. Because if you can connect with people, that's what matters. It doesn't have to be an extreme example.
Yeah, and it's not even connecting with people generally. It's connecting with somebody very specific. Like maybe there's one other person that has a kid that is going through something very similar. Maybe, to use my example, I've used this a couple times on the podcast, but my younger brother loves engineering. He loves robotics. He loves engineering. This has been his passion for so long. And so he started with some like very, very small things. He would, go on online courses that were free. He'd figure out ways to do it without a lot of resources. And then he started looking into other resources that were available to him through his school, through all of these other programs. And like, they have enriched his life so much, right? And just having the free options is great, but there are also so many other educational opportunities that people just don't even know about. And so if you can find those for your kids and then share them with somebody else or share what's working, even these small things, like even a small class, maybe it's like a college class that your kid is taking, or maybe it's like a summer camp or whatever. Even these tiny things have the opportunity to change someone's whole life, to change someone's whole trajectory. And so that's what I find is so cool. It's just like, you don't know what the small thing that could, ignite the fire and passion in your kid's life is. But that's why you pay attention, right? And that's why you figure out what you could put them into. You figure out how you can expose them to as much as possible. And so I love that.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I completely agree with you. And I really think that that it goes back to what you said. Everybody's an individual. Everybody has their own interests, talents, their own dreams, the own challenges they face, and their own talents. And so we need to have an education system and a variety of different options for families that truly reflect that. And so more kids have the opportunity to pursue their goals and their dreams and be productive members of their community, which you brought up earlier. And I really do believe that school choice and providing kids with a personalized education helps them understand the importance of the community around them. And when you have more community organizations, for example, getting involved in schools, or even creating microschools or non-traditional education, or teaching courses, whether it's a local chamber of commerce or a business league or local businesses together, or local nonprofits that focus on the environment, teaching kids about the natural world, you are building a stronger relationship between a child and a community. A heck of a lot stronger relationship, I would say, than when a kid plays a video game. And so that's not to knock video games, but I'm just saying we need to build these human-to-human connections in communities, or else we will lose as a country this sense of community that for so long defined where people live. And that feeling of being rooted, and that feeling of having people around you, a comfortable society surrounding you. And so I just think it's so important, and I think that it can all work well together, and we just have to get, we just have to get the naysayers to understand that this is not politics. This is not some sort of grand plot to hurt anybody. This is here. We're doing this because we want to lift everybody up. A rising tide can lift all ships here.
Yeah, and the argument against, so like, for example, the argument against choice in school is basically that you're going to take away some incredible people from certain schools. Or what are some of the other arguments that you've heard against it, and how would you debunk them, or not debunk, but like explain why they don't make sense to you?
Well, the biggest argument that you just mentioned there is that the most talented students in a school would be the ones who would leave. Well, that's one that I hear all the time. And in fact, I sat on a plane one year next to the principal of a school, and he told me that if school choice were expanded in his state, all the good kids would leave. And I said, why wouldn't it be that all the kids who are struggling would leave and the good ones would stay, because they're the ones succeeding and their parents wouldn't be incentivized to leave? And he said, well, those are the ones who have more involved parents, so they're going to want to leave anyway. And I'm like, sounds like you don't have any confidence in the product you're offering, the school that you're offering to families. And then it was blamed on parents again. I believe, and I think what the data has showed, is that theory of the case, which people say they're creaming, which I think is a strange term, the best students off of a school or whatever, from the top, that is not proven to be the case. And what in fact happens is students who are struggling leave for better environments. Now that then gets turned around to criticize the different schools that those kids went to when a standardized test is taken, and say, look, that school isn't doing so well. The kids didn't test well. Well, they didn't test well because they weren't testing well before. They just happened to leave. So there's a lot of numbers playing around here. So that's one thing that I think is pretty easy to debunk. The funding issue, I think, is another one where people say that school choice automatically will drain funds from public education. Actually, if you look at a well-designed school choice system where parents have more options in the public sector too, whether it's charter schools, open enrollment within a district, open enrollment outside of a district, full-time online schools, a robust selection of magnet schools. All of those are public sector options. And the more parents choose those public sector options, the more funding will go into public education. And so if public education and folks who are working in it want to care most about the bottom line and dollars and cents, which seems to be the biggest argument, what they need to do is advocate for greater public sector choice instead of restraining all choice for the sake of predictability in budgeting. And if they do that, and if they're willing to teach classes that somebody in an education savings account could take a one-off class, if they're willing to open up their sports programs to homeschooling students or students in private schools, if they're willing to do those things, that can attract revenue to a school district or to a school. And so this idea that there's a drain, well, things can go both ways. You can attract kids both ways. By acknowledging immediately or saying immediately you will lose money, you are saying that you believe the other options are better. I don't believe that. I think that in many cases, parents will choose public sector education, and that's what our studies show over and over and over again.
Interesting. Would you say that, do you think that current, I guess, traditional schools think like a business, right? So the example that you gave of funding will go away, funding will go down, as opposed, and then the other idea that you gave where maybe there are other sources of revenue, maybe there are other sources of opportunity. Do you think that also requires a difference in thinking to think like a business that needs to produce revenue and also find areas where it's valuable, right? So the idea of finding revenue is like in a business is what is valuable enough that somebody's going to pay for it. What do you think about that?
So what I think is it really depends on the state, I think. And I think that the longer that a state has had different school choice programs, the more the schools think in terms of what parents need and want and what they should be doing to keep and attract families. I was on, I moderated a discussion with a district school superintendent in Arizona a few months back who's absolutely phenomenal and talked about how his district can compete. And they are competing, and they are offering excellent services to families, and they are they're taking advantage of the new programs out there because they think that they have a lot to offer. That optimistic mindset is one that will attract more revenue for them if you just want to think of the money. But if you want to think of the kids, it's also good for all the kids that are being served, the ones already in the district and also the ones outside who could benefit from the excellence being offered in that district. And I think we need more of a focus on that. You know, I think revenue follows excellence in many cases and also follows people's purposeful ability to show people that excellence is there. And so, to answer your question, a yes or no, yes, I think people should think of things more as a business, but the business of education is also the business of achievement and excellence and parent satisfaction. It's not just dollars and cents.
And I love your emphasis on the fact that excellence attracts, because it's not just that excellence attracts, students and parents. Excellence also attracts incredible teachers and administrators and people that want to be a part of that as well.
Absolutely. And good school cultures where teachers are empowered and principals are empowered and parents have a meaningful say, not just in a bake sale or in a fundraiser, but in how kids are educated. All those things matter, and it matters. And people want community. And they want their kids to learn, and they want their kids to be happy. And it's not just about one factor. I think we've hit on that over and over again here. It's not just about one thing. Education is really nuanced. This is a human industry, and it's not even an industry. It's a space. It's a community of people.
So I have an interesting question. You mentioned something that made me think. It seems as though there's this assumption that successful kids have involved parents, right? So in this whole movement toward options and choice, you need somebody that cares about making that choice. You need somebody that cares about the option in general. What would you say for students, this is like a hypothetical, but it exists for sure, whose parents are not interested in making those choices for them? How does this also impact them?
Well, in a way, it's unfortunate and it's difficult for those families. And so what we don't do at our organization is gloss over it and say, well, those kids will benefit anyway because, maybe their school's going to get better. We would say we need to reach those families. We need to do more. We need to do more to get as many families aware as possible. And that's on us. And that's on the people who want these choices out there. That's not, let's not criticize the parent. Let's try to help the kid. Let's try to help the parent. That's what I would say, that it's a challenge. And that's
I love
one that
that.
we have been created as an organization literally to try to address, is this awareness gap. That's why awareness is in our name, National School Choice Awareness Foundation. We want people to be as aware as they can.
I love that. So this emphasis on aware, right? What do you find that parents are asking? So whenever they get into this whole rabbit hole of education options, what are they first asking? Is it the whole, my kid has run into a problem and I don't know what to do to solve it? Or how do you meet them there as well?
Well, there's a variety of reasons. You have parents who are looking, there's a variety of reasons why a parent would make a choice. And so the first is the simplest. Well, we can go through all of them. The simplest one is matriculation. So in a case where you're going from pre-K to elementary, middle to high, and you have the ability to make a choice, you want to look around. That accounts for a big chunk of choosers and people who are looking. So those parents are doing this as a natural thing. Some places, they just send their kid to the middle school that's been assigned, but increasingly you're seeing decision-making behaviors. The second thing would be moving from one community to another. That requires the process of choice. The third thing would be general wanting something better. And I put that in sort of like an umbrella term of, it's not necessarily a singular moment that would motivate a parent to say, we're getting out of here, or we need to flee. It's this gut feeling that, what, this is okay, or this is fair, but it's just not the best that I had hoped for my child. That's a huge percentage of searchers out there, parents who want to choose different environments for their kids. And then you have parents who really have acute issues, like their kid was bullied in school. Their kid has a medical situation that's not being addressed by school. The school is not safe. Those are situations where a parent needs to make an immediate choice. And those are really the emergency situations. So it really spans the spectrum of reasons why people would want to make a decision. And so that's why I hate it when people say, like, look at all these parents, they're leaving all these schools because they're tired of what's being taught in the classrooms and they think it's too progressive or conservative or whatever. And what I say to them is, that's a very narrow and inaccurate reading of the marketplace. The marketplace is just like any marketplace out there. You have a lot of reasons for somebody making a choice. Just like if you look at car buyers, and I'm not trying to say that cars and automotives is the same as kids, but there's a lot of reasons people buy or lease a new car. There are a lot of different reasons. It's not just that they got in an accident. It's not just that their old car died on the side of the road and they don't know what to do. There are a lot of reasons why people do things. Same with choosing school. So it's not just people are fleeing for one reason. It's also not just everybody's happy and they're just wandering around looking. It's a lot of different factors. I hope that answered your question. Yeah.
No, it did. And I do think that's really, really valuable to almost remind yourself whenever you're talking about education, is just that the reason that we're doing this, which is options, is the exact reason that people are coming to the question in general, is how do I find options that work for my family, that work for my child? One thing that's also been really interesting to me as I've had more conversations with families is just this emphasis on paying attention, right? Like the way that you figure out what your kid needs or what your kid likes or what is going wrong is literally just by paying attention. Have you seen that in your conversations with families as well?
Absolutely. I mean, especially after the pandemic, people saying that it's really everybody at the same time seeing what was going on in their kids' education and realizing that they now had to focus on this. And it wasn't just something you could send your kid to school. You had to be involved. You had to be engaged. And so everybody got to see what was going on all at the same time. And that spawned a lot of changes. But yeah, awareness, being involved, being engaged, asking questions, staying involved. One of the things in my book that I wrote about is choosing a school is just the first step. And then there's a lot of other things you need to do afterwards to stay engaged and make sure that you're maintaining this good relationship that you're hoping will be formed.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit to that, like maintaining it, and then also the fact that, like, okay, it's awesome whenever you try your first thing and then it works out, but sometimes, and realistically, you try your first thing and it doesn't work out, and your second thing doesn't work out, and your third thing doesn't work out, and then eventually you figure it out. But yeah, how do you empower parents? Because I know that that's something that's very core to your message as well, is empowering parents to do this properly.
Sure. So we really want families to look around at their options. We really want to make it easy for them to understand. One of the biggest barriers to that is jargon, and it is the use of educational terms that subtly convey to parents that they must need a master's in education to understand. They don't. They are the experts. They know their kids better than anyone else, and they need to trust in that expertise. And no one should ever be ashamed or afraid to say, can you tell me what that means more? Or can you elaborate on that? Or can you break that down in plain English or Spanish? And so I think that the way that we do this first is to break it down into understandable, jargon-free language for families, and break it out by steps so that families can understand the steps that it takes to choose a new school and what options are available. For example, you could tell a parent that they have open enrollment, intra-district open enrollment in their state, and they will look at you and they will say, what does that mean? And I, having done this for 20 years, still can't get intra and inter straight in my head. And so I don't want somebody who is out there trying to find a school for their kid, trying to understand this stupid terminology. What parents care about in many cases are, can I get there? Is it a good option? How much do I have to pay? Those are the things that are really key, and it's not as much about structure. The movement gets so caught up, when I talk about the movement, everybody advocating for different types of schools, different types of pathways into those schools, really caught up in, well, we need to call charter schools public charter schools because it's so important that everybody knows they're public. What really is important is people know that they're free. I mean, that's what parents really care about. The things that parents care about and tell us they care about are how they're going to be able to overcome the barriers that exist in their own mind or that exist in reality. Mm-hmm. Transportation, cost, and then finally, of course, whether it is really a good fit. And so we help parents understand that. We help parents understand the process of actually choosing what's available in their state, the fact that education is really a state policy, not a federal policy, and a lot that, yes, you could live in one state and have a ton of choices like I am here in Florida, and you could live in Alabama and have fewer choices. And that's just a reality. And then we help parents understand terminology that is used frequently. We have glossaries in English and in Spanish, and we have worksheets that help them go through the steps of the school search process. And then every time a new policy is passed or enacted in a state, we do an explainer that lets parents know, when is it coming down the line? What are the steps? What needs to happen before you can take advantage of it? You know, and sometimes we say things that might not be popular. There have been programs out there that were in the middle of a legal fight, and advocates were saying, okay, parents, unenroll your kids from their existing schools, sign up for this ESA program. And we would tell parents, get yourself on a waiting list, but don't unenroll your kid from their existing school, because if this program gets struck down, your kid is not going to be able to get back into their selective public school or into their charter school without another lottery or waiting list. And so we're honest about it. And I think that's really important too. Just straightforward honesty.
Yeah. One question I have for you, and then I'll hit you with a couple of rapid fire as you were sure. saying that. What is been really interesting to me, the more that I look into policy too, is that policies is not always made with parents in mind, not always made with, the child in mind. And very similar to what you were talking about, where it's like all of these very specific words that nobody knows what they mean. And then you're like, hold on a second. What do parents actually care about? Well, they don't care about the public aspect. They don't care about the charter aspect. They care about the free aspect, right? And really understanding the parent and the parent perspective and what they care about. It seems as though y'all have done an incredible job doing that. You and your company. How have y'all done that? How have y'all made that, such a thing that exists both in your company and the things that you do, and then also the things that you're building?
Well, we are a nonprofit, and so our core audience is parents and also We work with schools as well, 27,532 of them this year, of
Wow.
all types. And so last year we served more than 2.6 million parents in English and in Spanish. We have 3 programs across our organization: National School Choice Week, which is really our flagship program each January; Navigate School Choice, which helps families navigate all their options in English; and Conoce, which does the same thing in Spanish, as well as creates a space where Spanish language school choice advocates and communicators and folks who work at schools can work together to raise awareness in the Hispanic and Latino communities about options out there. We have built this organization over many years, and really what was the motivator for building Navigate and Conoce was the pandemic. And what happened was we had been doing School Choice Week for, by then, 11 years, and the pandemic hit. We realized that we wouldn't be able to do events the next year because of all the regulations and the health issues. And so we decided to switch gears really quickly, and we developed some online resources for parents whose kids were struggling with remote learning. Within 3 weeks, 50,000 parents had visited that site.
Wow.
Without us spending a dime. We realized we were onto something, and we kept writing and building and developing new resources. And now one of our key goals is to expand that navigation project even more so that more families can benefit from it. And at the core of it is just being honest to parents. And it has always been, whether it's School Choice Week, Navigate, or Conoce, never preferencing one option over another, never making a decision either subtly or directly for a parent, never telling people that school choice is necessary because one option is good and another is bad. That's not what we do.
Dang, that's a perfect segue into our rapid fire questions.
I like rapid fire. Hopefully I could keep it quick.
Yes, I mean, I have the same problem. There's so many thoughts in your mind, and then it's
I
like,
got
okay,
too many in my mind.
Okay, question number 1. I would love to hear what trends you are extremely excited about in the 2025-2026 school year in education choice.
Trends that I'm most excited about are surge in non-traditional options and parent demand for non-traditional options, and to see how they can develop even greater adoption.
Love. Second rapid fire question. What do you think is still missing in this conversation, and also just for parents? Like what is not being provided yet that needs to be?
More information, especially at the state level. It's bad. Go on a State Department of Education website. You're stuck in the 90s. Transportation, frequently ignored, a real issue, and needs to be addressed. And these new programs, they're really awesome. We love them. Can't wait to promote them more. The administration of these programs is not as good as it needs to be.
Awesome. And then our last rapid fire question. I would love if you could paint the picture for the kind of world that you envision in education.
I envision a world in education where every single child in this country, regardless of who they are, regardless of how much money their parents make, regardless of what language they speak, regardless of their nationality, regardless of whether they live in an urban area, a suburban area, an exurban area, or a rural area, gets the best possible education. An education that inspires them to live their own American dream as they see it for themselves. Pursue excellence as they can imagine it. And an America where every single parent has the opportunity to choose from as big of a menu of options for their kids' education as possible. Free, accessible, high quality options so that no kid falls through the cracks just because a school didn't fit what made them tick. That's my vision.
That was incredible. Everybody, Andrew Campanella, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you very much, Ella. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for having me.